Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Joey Francess, your life, love, and relationship coach. And thank you so much for joining me. If you're dating right now, you're probably doing one of two things. You're either locking it in too soon, exclusivity, label this is my person energy, and now you're trying to make it work because you've already told yourself it should work, or you're drifting into that modern gray zone where everything is intimate, but nothing is defined, and you're calling it taking it slow, while it slowly takes your clarity. Both end the same way. You look back and realize you gave too much of yourself to something you didn't fully verify. And that's what I want to correct by giving you a cleaner way to move through the beginning. Because here's the truth. Giving someone your full attention is not the same thing as giving them your commitment. Full attention is not a vow. Full attention is how you see someone clearly. It's how you gather data. It's how you figure out whether their foundation matches your foundation, whether the blueprint, see what I did there? The blueprint aligns, whether the chemistry is real, the attraction holds outside of the novelty, whether the connection is something you can actually build on. So there are 3 states I keep seeing people fall into, and if you can recognize them, you'll stop wasting months in the wrong one. And this is something that I've sort of came to terms on my own. So take it for what you will. First state I call the label lock. The second one, the situationship. And the one most people don't do as much as they probably should, the discovery phase. And once you understand the discovery phase, once you understand how to date with direction without forcing a relationship, you stop getting trapped by the story. You stopped getting trapped by ambiguity. All right. So we're just going to break it down. First of all, the label lock. Let's start with the one that looks the healthiest on the outside. You meet someone, it's going well, they're consistent, you like them, the conversations are easy. The attraction is there. You feel hopeful. And then maybe after a few dates, maybe after a few weeks, you just have this moment where you feel the subtle pressure to make it official. And sometimes you do it because you want to. Sometimes you do it because it feels like the mature thing to do. Sometimes you do it because you're tired of the uncertainty. And sometimes you do it because you just don't want to lose them. And again, I'm not anti-label. I'm not anti-commitment. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a psychological shift that happens when you use the label before you have enough information. Because a label isn't just a word. A label has an identity story. Once you call someone your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, your brain starts to organize your life around that storyline. It's subtle, but it's powerful. You start thinking, this is who I'm focusing on. This is who I'm building with. This is the person I choose. And the moment your brain makes that shift, you stop doing the thing, what you're supposed to be doing early on, which is evaluate them. You start doing something else. You start investing. And investment changes your standards without you noticing, because now you're not just observing whether they match your blueprint. Now you're proving to yourself that your choice was right. Now you're protecting the story, protecting the identity. And that's where people get trapped. Not trapped by another person, trapped by the narrative they've committed to. This is why a label can make it socially hard to leave. Because once the label exists, leaving doesn't feel like, hey, it's been great getting to know you, but we're not aligned. Leaving starts to feel like, I failed. I wasted my time. I made the wrong choice. And now I have to start over. People are going to ask me what happened. am I going to look like inconsistent? And that social and internal pressure can keep you in relationships that your intuition has already clocked as wrong. And here is one of the most important parts of this. The problem isn't that you gave them your full undivided attention. The problem is when you start believing that full attention means you now have to make it work. Because a lot of you date like this. Once you decide to focus on one person, you become loyal, which is great. You become consistent, which is fantastic. You become all in mentally. You don't entertain other options. You treat it seriously. And I personally respect that. I actually think that's a good quality. I do it myself, mainly because it helps me evaluate someone quicker than if you are to casually date 4 or 5 people at once. But as long as you don't turn attention into obligation, you start telling yourself, I'm giving them my full undivided attention, so it has to work. No, that's not what attention is for in the beginning. In the beginning, attention is not a vow. It is not a contract. It is not a promise. Attention is for assessment. The purpose of focusing on one person early is not to focus the relationship into existence. It's to gather clean data. It's to see how they show up when they don't have to impress you anymore. It's to see how they communicate when you're not in the honeymoon phase anymore. It's to see whether their life is stable enough to even hold a relationship. It's to see if you actually like them, who you become around them, if the attraction is real beyond novelty. So if you've ever found yourself staying longer than you should because you felt like leaving would make you feel like the bad guy, or leaving would mean you gave up, or leaving would mean starting over, that is the label lock. It's when identity arrives before information. It's when the story becomes stronger than the truth. And by the way, this is one of the most common ways good people lose themselves. Because they're not staying because they're weak. They're staying because they're loyal. Not only loyal to the people, but loyal to themselves. They're staying because they don't want to hurt someone. They're staying because they don't want to feel like the villain in their own story. And I'm sure there's a shit ton of you out there that have gone through this. I know there's a bunch of you that have come to me and have literally said to me that you're staying with someone because you don't like confrontation, or you're staying with someone because you don't want to be the bad guy because they're such a nice person. But the thing is, if the foundation doesn't match, loyalty doesn't fix that. Loyalty just delays the exit. So the next one, the good old fashioned situationship. The situationship is the modern disease that pretends to be maturity because it's always dressed in these calm sounding sentences. Let's just go with the flow. Let's not put pressure on it. Listen, I know me, I don't want to rush. How about we just see where it goes? And listen, there is a healthy version of going slow, but the situationship is not the healthy version. The situationship is what happens when there's intimacy without intention. It's not defined by no label. It's defined by no shared direction. Because what's actually happening in a situationship is usually this. One person is acting like they're building. The other person is acting like they're browsing. One person is showing up with relational energy. The other person is showing up with access energy. And if you've ever been in one, you know exactly how it feels. It feels like you're always one conversation away from either clarity or collapse. It feels like you're doing emotional labor for a relationship that doesn't technically exist. If you feel like you're careful with your words because you don't want to scare them off, it feels like you're consistently interpreting. It feels like you're graceful for basic consistency because you're not allowed to expect it. And the reason situationships become so addictive is because the reward is intermittent. You get just enough to stay hopeful, but not enough to feel secure. That is not patience. That is a nervous system loop. And the core problem is simple. If someone is getting everything they want without commitment, why would they voluntarily commit? If they get companionship, affection, sex, attention, emotional support, someone to text, someone to spend weekends with, without having to name you, claim you, build with you, or choose you clearly, what incentive is there to change? This is why we'll see is so dangerous when it has no structure behind it. Because we'll see often means, give me the benefits of you while I keep my options open. And I know some of you are already pushing back in your head like, Joy, it's not that deep. People are just scared. People have trauma. People got hurt. Yeah. And I understand that. I'm not trying to demonize anyone, but I want to tell you the truth. Your pain is not proof of your maturity. Someone can be scared and still be selfish. Someone can be wounded and still be irresponsible. Someone can have trauma and still choose to keep you in limbo because limbo benefits them. So in the situationship, the issue isn't no label. The issue is that there is no agreement about what you're doing. And in the absence of an agreement, the default becomes this. The person who wants less clarity controls the relationship. Because if you want clarity, all of a sudden, you're too much now. If you want direction, oh, you're moving too fast. If you want to know what this is, you're pressuring. And now you're negotiating for basics. That's not dating. That's emotional bargaining. And here's where breadcrumbing and ghosting live. They thrive in this space. Breadcrumbing, there is a previous episode on that if you wanted to go back and listen to it. Breadcrumbing is when someone gives you tiny little pieces, just enough to keep you attached, but never enough to build anything real. A text every few days, a random, I miss you, a late night, what are you up to? Are you awake? A compliment, a promise, an invitation that never becomes a plan. Breadcrumbing is a way of keeping access without responsibility. It's a way of keeping you on the hook while maintaining plausible deniability. And then there's ghosting. Ghosting, as we all know, is what happens when someone doesn't want the discomfort of honesty. So they choose the comfort of disappearance. They don't end it. They just evaporate. And I want to be clear. If you're listening and you've ghosted people, again, I'm not saying you're a bad person. At least not completely evil. But sometimes ghosting happens because of safety. Sometimes someone doesn't respect boundaries. And the cleanest exit is silence. But most of the time, ghosting is not about safety. It's about avoidance. It's someone saying, I want out, but I don't want the emotional responsibility of telling you I'm out. So the situationship becomes a perfect environment for those behaviors because there is no shared standard. There's no shared agreement that says we handle each other like adults. So what do? We don't jump into the label lock and we don't drift into the situationship. We build the middle lane on purpose. And this is what I like to call the discovery phase. This is the stage you described perfectly. You're trying to get to know each other. You're trying to see whether the foundations match. You're trying to see whether your blueprints align. You're trying to see whether chemistry and attraction are real and sustainable. And you're also trying to maintain one key truth. If it does not align, we can walk away without hard feelings. We can dissolve what was there like grown adults. That's discovery. Discovery is intentional without being forced. It's slow without being vague. Discovery is attentive without being attached. It's not we're together, but it's also not we're nothing. Discovery is we're exploring with direction. And this is where I want to give you language that actually matches who you are. This is the line. A label is identity. Direction is agreement. That's it. A label tells the world what you are. Direction tells the truth about what you're doing. And direction doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to sound like a contract. It just has to protect you from the two extremes. Because here's what direction does. It prevents the label lock from trapping you in a story too early. It prevents the situationship from trapping you in ambiguity. Ambiguity. I always have a hard time with that word. Ambiguity for too long. Direction says, I like you. I want to explore this. I want to do it intentionally. I'm not trying to force a label early, but I also don't do indefinite. That sentence alone changes the whole dynamic, because you're not asking them to promise you forever. You're asking them to be honest about the present. And this is important. The discovery phase is not a loophole for people who are afraid of commitment. It's a method for people who respect reality. Because reality is this: you can't know someone in a week. You can't know their patterns in 3 dates. You can't know how they handle stress, disappointment, boredom, routine, conflict, temptation, and responsibility when you're still in the honeymoon phase, the highlight reel. So discovery is the stage where you let time reveal the person without letting time steal your standards. And the reason most people fail here is because they don't understand the difference between giving attention and giving attachment. They give full attention, which, like I mentioned, it's great. But they also give full emotional access too early. They give partner-level privileges to someone who hasn't earned partner-level trust. They start merging lives before they've verified alignment. They start telling themselves a story before they've even collected enough data. Discovery phase is where you stop doing that. It's where you keep your heart open, but your eyes open too. It's where you say, I'm here, I'm present, I'm exploring, but I'm still evaluating. And listen, evaluation isn't cold. Evaluation is being respectful, because the goal of dating isn't to win somebody. The goal is to find fit. If the fit is there, great, we build. If the fit isn't there, also great. We don't force it. That is what intention is. So, how does discovery work in real life? It works when there's a simple agreement that protects the experience. Not a label, an agreement about direction. Here's what that agreement sounds like in plain language. Look, I like you. I'm enjoying this. I'm not trying to rush anything because I take relationships seriously. And I want to make sure it's real. But I also don't do the vague thing. If we're going to keep seeing each other, I want it to be with intention. And if either of us feels it's not a fit, we say it. We are grown adults. There is no reason to ghost. That is a discovery agreement. Notice what it does. It doesn't force a future. It doesn't pressure commitment. And it doesn't trap you socially. But it does protect you from the emotional chaos of the situationship. And it keeps you honest too. Because a lot of people think they want clarity. But what they really want is control. Discovery isn't control. Discovery is integrity. It's saying, I'm going to explore this like an adult. And the best part, discovery makes it easier to walk away cleanly when it's not aligned. Because the purpose was never to force it. The purpose was to find out. Now, let's look at why the discovery phase actually creates better relationships. Let me say something that might sound a bit backwards. The discovery phase makes commitment stronger later. Because commitment should be the outcome of evidence, not the outcome of momentum. When people commit early out of momentum, they often end up having to renegotiate the relationship once reality shows up. When people stay vague out of fear, they often end up emotionally tangled without any structure to protect them. But when people date through discovery, commitment becomes a natural next step, not a pressured one. It becomes, I see you, I've watched you, I know your patterns, I know how you handle your life, I know how you handle me. The foundations match, the attraction is real, the consistency is real. So you know what? Let's do this. Let's build. That is different than we've been hanging out for 4 months. So I guess we should define this. Or we've been exclusive for 2 weeks. So now I'm going to ignore the red flags because I don't want to start over. Discovery prevents both. It's the stage where you learn the person without losing yourself. Now, we get to the part some of you specifically wanted. How do you end things like grown adults? Because this is where most people either ghost, breadcrumb, or fade off into the distance. And all three are failures of integrity. The discovery phase is supposed to end one of two ways. It either A, becomes a relationship, or B, it dissolves cleanly. And dissolving cleanly doesn't mean you're cold. It means you respect the other person's humanity enough to give them reality. If you shared intimacy with someone, you at the very least owe them clarity. Unless, of course, clarity would put you at risk. And I mean like physical and mental harm. That's the standard. Not because you're obligated to over-explain, not because you need to justify your choice, not because you need permission, but because disappearing is a form of emotional violence in small doses. It leaves the other person stuck with questions they didn't choose. And breadcrumbing is worse in a different way. Breadcrumbing is keeping someone emotionally tethered to you. It sends little signals that keeps their hope alive while you benefit in one way or another. It's comfort seeking. It's, I don't want you, but I also don't want to lose access to you. And I'm going to say this as plainly as I can. If you don't want someone, let them go. Don't keep them in your orbit for ego, attention, sex, or emotional support. That's not kindness. That's consumption. So here's how an adult dissolves the relationship in the discovery phase. It's short, it's respectful, and it's direct. It could sound something like this. Hey, I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I respect you, but I don't feel the alignment. I'm looking for long-term. I don't want to drag this out or let it turn into confusion. So I wanted to be honest and end it cleanly. That's it. You don't need a thesis statement. You don't need to write a novel. You don't need to critique their personality or anything else about them for that matter. You just need to tell the truth. And if you genuinely feel like friendship could exist, and I'm going to be careful here because let's be friends is often a way of softening the blow for the person you're ending it with. You can add in, I'm open to being friends down the line as long as it's mutual, but I also understand if you'd rather have space. That's adult. That gives them dignity. And here's another adult move. You let them feel what they feel without arguing them out of it. A lot of people end things and then they panic when the other person is disappointed and suddenly they start negotiating. You don't need to do that. You can be kind without being available for emotional bargaining. Now, what if you're on the other side of this? What if you're the one being breadcrumbed? Here is your standard, and this technically should be on the blueprint. If someone only shows up when it's convenient, only reaches out when they're bored, only offers vague handouts, and never makes real plans, never moves towards clarity, but keeps sending you little pings to keep you warm, you don't have a connection problem. You have a self-respect decision. And the clean response is something like, hey, I've enjoyed getting to know you, but I'm not interested in something that stays undefined. If you want to explore this intentionally, I'm open. If not, I'm going to move on. And then you do something most people don't do. You fucking mean it. No more late night replies, no more maybes, no more being available for crumbs. Because here's what crumbs do. They teach your nervous system to beg. And you were not built for that. And what about ghosting? If you're dating in discovery, ghosting becomes less likely, generally speaking, because you've already set a standard that says, we don't disappear. But if someone ghosts you anyways, I want you to remember this. Ghosting is not confusion. Ghosting is not they're busy. Ghosting is a character reveal. It tells you when discomfort arrives, they choose avoidance. And whether they come back in a week with an apology or in a month with a, hey stranger, your job is to not romanticize it. Your job is to ask yourself, do I want a relationship, any sort of relationship, with someone whose default is disappearance? Because that's what you're screening for, not their chemistry, not their charm, their reliability. So the adult dissolve is part of the blueprint method, because the blueprint method is not just about choosing the right person. It's also about how you exit the wrong ones. Because when your foundations don't align, it's pretty black and white on what you should do. Just do it in the nicest way possible. So let's review. The label lock is when identity arrives before information. And now you feel socially and psychologically pressured to make it work because you've given someone your full undivided attention and you've turned that attention into obligation. The situationship is when intimacy arrives without shared direction. And now you're giving relationship energy and an undefined structure where breadcrumbing becomes normal, ghosting becomes an exit strategy, and clarity becomes too much. The discovery phase is the middle that protects you. Intention without pressure, attention without attachment, direction without pretending. And the line I want you to remember is simple. Full attention isn't a vow, it's part of the process. You don't focus on one person because you're committing to them. You focus on one person so you can see them clearly. So you can assess the foundation. So you can see whether their blueprint matches yours. So you can see whether the chemistry is real, whether the attraction holds when the novelty fades. And if it doesn't align, you dissolve it like an adult. No ghosting, no breadcrumbing, no dragging it out because you feel guilty. No keeping people in limbo because you just like the attention. Just clarity. Because clarity is kindness. And people who are emotionally mature will not punish you for being honest. They will respect it. So if you're dating right now and you're stuck between I don't want to force it and I don't want to waste my time, I want you to hear me. You don't need a label today, but you do need direction. You don't need to promise for forever, but you do need to be honest about what you're doing. And you don't need to stay in anything that requires you to abandon your standards just to keep someone close. If that's the case, you are just someone's fantasy living on borrowed time. That's it. That's all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. As per usual, if you have any questions for me or some comments or ideas, you can message me on my website. That's joyfrances.com, JoeyFrances.com. And there you can get access to me, my email, send me a message. Also my books, just in case you want to do this on your own time. And yeah. That's pretty much it. Before I go, I just want to leave you with something. Date for discovery, not for dependency. Till next time.